Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be the best wildcard team for Gameweek 18. I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and technically this video is recorded on Christmas Eve, and the clean sheet odds haven't changed so far, with Liverpool top against Wolves at home with a 51% probability of keeping a clean sheet. Arsenal are in second, facing Brighton at home. Everton, Man City, Chelsea and Crystal Palace complete the top six, and in last spot, unsurprisingly, it is Wolves facing Liverpool away. And by the way, have you ever seen someone wear a Christmas hat with headphones? Let me know down in the comment section below. But hopefully you enjoy the festivities and all the FPL content headed your way for Gameweek 18. I posted the transfer tips earlier this week and the team selection will be headed your way. And don't forget the Boxing Day deadline stream, where I'll be going live around 2 hours before the official deadline. Also engage with the content by liking this video, subscribing to the channel. We're trying to get this to over 100 likes and close in on 38k on YouTube and reach new goals going into 2026. And let's build all the social media platforms. There is my Discord server for FPL and UCL fantasy updates, Twitter, Instagram and Blue Sky. You can find me by typing FPL Dylan or Dylan RCM. And if you want to support the channel even further, it is patreon.com/FPL Dylan. For likes to my videos, proud to add to comments, amongst many other perks. There is the join button on YouTube as well to become a channel member. And a big up to those who have subscribed, liked, supported the content over the years. I have been going strong for over 5 years when it comes to FPL and UCL fantasy, and it's all thanks to your support. And there's also my FPL League if you want to join and compete with the very best. And check out my Spotify, leave a 5-star review. It really goes a long way to supporting the channel. You will see the top 10 captains in the team selection video and the deadline stream, and there's way more in terms of team news, injury updates, where that came from. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. My squad value is 102.9 million with 0.1 in the bank. Some of you watching will have even more at your disposal, and others will have even less, but it also depends on the players you've got in your squad and how much value you've got tied up in them. That is very important. I'll start off with the two goalkeepers as usual, and I'll keep things fairly simple in this position, but there are multiple changes in the outfield areas, and when it comes to between the sticks, there are probably 3 or 4 standouts overall that I would recommend going into 2026, and they can be solid long-term options onto your next wildcard, preferably after Gameweek 30, with all the doubles and blanks headed our way. Robert Sanchez is 4th for points scored amongst goalkeepers after that assist against Newcastle in a 2-2 thriller. And you've also got Roofs at the same price point at 4.8 million, so you could certainly make a case for going for the Sunderland goalkeeper instead. But I still think it's worth covering Chelsea defensively in the long term, albeit their short-term fixtures are quite poor on paper, and you wouldn't expect too many clean sheets. But I still think Chelsea can walk away with 1 or 2 over the next 5 game weeks, and Robert Sanchez is still a solid choice against Aston Villa. And Chelsea are near the top of the clean sheet odds, and those were taken by the website fantasyfootballpundit.com. With the backup, I'll keep it very simple. Martin Dubravka offers great value at 4 million, and you won't start him very often. And I know there's this temptation to go for 2 rotating goalkeepers. Kelleher and Verbruggen could work, but I also happen to have that preference of 1 main goalkeeper, and I think Raya, Pickford, Roofs and Sanchez, the 4 high-scoring goalkeepers in the game, they are the standouts, and having that Arsenal defensive coverage is always going to be a big plus, and even doubling up on the Gunners defensively will still be very desirable over the coming weeks. But I think Sanchez will still be my preferred goalkeeper when it comes to value, and whilst Verbruggen and Kelleher are decent in their own right, you won't get that sort of clean sheet security as you would with Chelsea and Robert Sanchez. But the problem with the Blues is, or maybe the good thing about them, is that you can cover them in many different ways defensively with Reece James. Even Gusto will have his moments, and I think Chalobah has been exceptional from an FPL perspective, and even the likes of Fofana can come in and do a decent job from time to time. Cucurella is going to offer relative consistency, but I don't think he's really worth that price tag, especially compared to Van Dijk, Timber, and those 2 premiums who are returning very soon in Gabriel and Daniel Munoz. But what about the injury to Hincapié? It is short term. I'll be covering the 5 defenders in this next section, but the Ecuadorian won't make it this time round, and we should see Gabriel return to the Arsenal side within the next couple of weeks. And I think the sort of destination or the time frame for his return will be against Liverpool in a couple of weeks' time. Arsenal don't make things easy, as we saw last night in the Carabao Cup against Crystal Palace. The XG generated was almost 4, but they conceded in the dying embers of that game because they couldn't see off the chances they created in the first half, and Mark Gay scored a late equaliser. But Arsenal converted all of their penalties, and Jurrien Timber was involved in the shootout. I think he's the best defender in the game until Gabriel and Munoz return from their respective injuries, and Hincapié has an injury to his collarbone, and it's going to be a short-term issue. So he could be back for Gameweek 18, but I think 19 is probably more likely for the Ecuadorian, and Timber will just offer you that security of starts, also some attacking potential. He has really improved in that regard this season with the assists and the goal threat, and I think Timber also offers decent goal potential because of the amount of shots he has inside the box for a defender, which rivals the likes of Daniel Munoz overall. So I think having 1 or 2 Arsenal defenders is still viable, but they aren't keeping as many clean sheets as they were early in the season, particularly in October, when they didn't concede a single goal throughout the entire month across all competitions. But there has been a regression. I think Gabriel has been a huge miss, Saliba in recent weeks as well, but he's back and he's putting in some decent performances too, and I think Arsenal will only improve once their key players return from injury. That also includes Kai Havertz. We saw Gabriel Jesus have great moments in the last couple of matches, and that includes his 100th appearance against Crystal Palace as well. But the second defender I'm going for here is from Man City, who are in great form. You can go for Ruben Dias or Gvardiol. They offer decent value at the moment, but Nico O'Reilly is even cheaper at 5.3 million. You won't get as much in terms of DEFCON, defensive contributions, compared to the other two I just mentioned, but he is starting every single game right now, and Ait Nouri is unavailable because he's off to the African Cup of Nations, and even when he was fit, O'Reilly was keeping him out of the side. He is clearly the first choice, and he does have that attacking threat, particularly through the assists and in open play. So O'Reilly is definitely worth the coverage, and the same goes for another premium in Virgil van Dijk, and this could be a placeholder for a Gabriel or Daniel Munoz in a couple of weeks' time. So that's why I'm going for this sort of structure, which is quite hefty in the defensive line. You don't need to do that necessarily, and with the 4th and 5th defenders, especially if you go for Van Dijk, O'Reilly and Timber, you can go a bit cheaper with the other two choices, and that includes Mukiele. But if you're also keen on going for Rifs in goal, a double up in the Sunderland defence isn't something I necessarily recommend, but Mukiele would likely be your 5th defender anyways. I don't really suggest having 4 to 4.2 million defenders in your ranks, which could include Estev, Rodon, Mukiele and Alderete. I think having 1 is probably enough, and you want to have that sort of mid-priced option like a Matty Cash, so that can also be interchanged with Joachim Andersen, Michael Keane, and plenty of other options like Marcus Senesi as well. And I think it's good to have that sort of structure, and it allows you to be quite adaptable, open-minded, and you can change formations when needed based on rotation, suspensions, and injuries. But the other defender is looking at the long term, and you look at the next fixture against Man United away, it's not going to be great, but then it's followed by Burnley, and Newcastle are top of the FDR until February alongside Arsenal. So Chow does make it into this team, and Nick Pope will be back very soon and ready to start games for Newcastle, so I would avoid Aaron Ramsdale completely. Dan Burn is out for the next couple of weeks, and Newcastle have plenty of defensive injuries at the moment, so Chow could be a benchable player for the next couple of weeks. But when we come to January and February, that's where Newcastle will only improve defensively. They're actually second in terms of XGC, expected goals conceded, only behind Arsenal, and I think they're going to keep plenty of clean sheets until the end of the season. So Chow offers decent value at 5 million with DEFCON potential, the odd goal here and there. We saw a brace, of course, against Everton a couple of weeks ago, and I do like this structure. You're covering some of the best teams defensively and across the country in Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City and Liverpool, and I think Newcastle could also enter that equation, although Sunderland have been very impressive so far this season. But let's now head over to the midfielders, where things get very interesting after the injury to Bruno Fernandes, who is expected to miss out the next couple of weeks, as covered in my Transtits video. So I'll highlight the best replacements for him and also other key absentees like Mohamed Salah because of the African Cup of Nations. And let's not forget Brian Mbeumo, who is still in over 10% of managers' teams in FPL. Declan Rice went up in price to 7.2 million overnight, and he's one of the best replacements for Bruno Fernandes. I'll be talking about this in my team selection, and Rice is one of the front runners. If I'm looking long term, he's probably the simplest choice, and he's worth including as one of your top midfielders in the game. I know Bukayo Saka has been in brilliant form since November, but I just think he costs way too much money, whilst Rice is going to offer you better value. He won't give you many goals, with only 2 so far this season, but 6 assists, over 160 defensive contributions, plenty of bonus points as well. Declan Rice offers you a solid, reliable option who plays virtually every single game for Arsenal, and against Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup, he came on quite late as a substitute to see that out, and the same goes for Bukayo Saka. But I think Rice is going to be the standout Bruno Fernandes replacement for a lot of people, but there is definitely the case to say Phil Foden is going to be the definitive top choice to replace Bruno Fernandes, and that's probably what I would say as well. But it also depends on who you've got already. And in my case, Phil Foden has been in my team for several weeks. He has been the main catalyst for my recent green arrows alongside Bruno Fernandes. So it's very important to nail down the best replacements for these players. And of course, Fernandes will be a massive miss over Christmas. He was actually one of my top suggestions over this period, but Foden will definitely do the job. We have seen so many big returns recently with those double-digit hauls, and I think a few more are on the horizon as well. So I think these two would definitely make it into this wildcard team. Then it becomes very open because Morgan Rogers has produced back-to-back 15-pointers, but it's Chelsea and Arsenal up next. He does make it into this wildcard squad, but what I'm going to do later, using the website FPL.team, is show you some alternative moves and things you could do to bring in players with better fixtures, for example, and a slightly different structure. So apart from Rodgers, I'm going for Harry Wilson, who is currently yellow flagged. I would expect him to be available against West Ham away, which I talked about in my recent video, and I think he's still a decent short-term punt and almost a perfect 8th attacker, if you will. You can go for him and a cheap third forward and have them rotate with each other over the coming weeks, and that's the plan with this current wildcard squad. But some of you might not want that sort of structure, and that's where the latest section in this video will really help you to define your favourite players in every single position and go for a sort of team structure that really suits you and your FPL approach. So apart from Harry Wilson, there's one spot left. Bruno Guimaraes would be very appealing, and the same goes for Antoine Semenyo, who is linked with Man City. He could move there in January, and he's one yellow card away from suspension. So if you can avoid getting booked over the next 2 matches, then he will be fine, because then the threshold increases from 5 yellow cards to 10, and that will then go from the 19th Premier League game to the 32nd. So that's where things will change a little bit when it comes to suspension risk. Bruno Guimaraes, who I just mentioned, is yet another one of those, and Dominic Szoboszlai will miss Gameweek 18 as a result of his 5th yellow card of the season against Tottenham Hotspur. But Antoine Semenyo has produced 16 points over the past 2 game weeks, and just like Morgan Rogers, he's showing really fine form at the moment, and both of them would be ideal on a wild card. But I'm guessing the big absence, apart from Anthony Gordon, who's also showing good form, is Matheus Cunha, and he definitely has a stake of being in this team, and that's what I'll show you later on using the website FPL.team. But it does require something a little bit different. So Rogers being downgraded as one example, or even Harry Wilson to a Granit Xhaka, and that gives you enough money to upgrade Antoine Semenyo, if you call that an upgrade, to Matheus Cunha. But before I talk about those possibilities and alternatives, it's time to reveal the 3 forwards of the best wildcard team, and things have changed drastically over the past couple of weeks. The one constant is Erling Haaland, who has almost double the number of points of second place Igor Thiago when it comes to points scored amongst forwards, and he is the default captain for a reason, because Haaland is so consistent. He produces double-digit returns very regularly, and when you look at the alternatives in terms of premiums, they haven't really stacked up to what they did in previous seasons, like Mohamed Salah, Cole Palmer, and even Saka, despite some decent returns from him over the past month. But with Haaland, you know you're going to get goals in virtually most matches this season and plenty of braces and hat-tricks along the way. And that's why for the first half of the campaign, I've been very bullish on targeting him when it comes to that booster. I played it early in Gameweek 6 against Burnley, and going into Gameweek 17 against West Ham, he seemed destined for a massive return, which he produced, of course, and ultimately it isn't going to be rocket science or anything like that, but Haaland is a default captain for a reason. But Gameweek 18 might be a little bit different because there is an opportunity to go against him, and Man City against Forest could be quite low scoring. You would expect City to win the game, but I think there's a chance to go for Hugo Ekitike as your main captain this week, who is facing Wolves at home. Alexander Isak will be out for months due to an injury. Dominic Szoboszlai is suspended, and Salah is off to the African Cup of Nations. So I think Ekitike will be relied upon, and he'll get the bulk of the big chances. And he has 5 goals over the past 3 game weeks, which now takes him 3rd in terms of points scored amongst forwards. In an ideal world, I would go for Jarrod Bowen as the 3rd forward, and that would be my perfect sort of forward line at this moment in time. I think Igor Thiago is still decent and worth holding in certain situations, and you could say something similar about Jean-Philippe Mateta, although I'm less keen about him, and I think he's more sellable over the coming weeks, but Tottenham at home is a decent fixture for both Crystal Palace and Mateta. There is Joao Pedro, you've got Nick Voltemada. All of these options are viable, but if I'm kind of ranking the third best forward after Ekitike and Haaland, I would say Bowen is the next best, followed by Igor Thiago, Nick Voltemada, and then Dominic Calvert-Lewin because of the value and the recent form, scoring in 5 consecutive games. But the upcoming fixtures aren't great. That includes Sunderland away, also Liverpool away, but Calvert-Lewin has scored against many big teams so far this season, and that includes recent matches against Chelsea, Man City and Liverpool. He also scored a brace against Crystal Palace, so Calvert-Lewin is fixture-proof, and he's a very streaky player. He can go 10 to 20 games without scoring, but as we've just seen, he can also score in 5 consecutive games and offer supreme value at 5.8 million. But let's go to the website FPL.team, talk about the starting 11 and the captaincy, as well as some alternatives in every single position, so you're well prepared for Gameweek 18 and beyond. The expected points is quite low at 48.9, but it would improve substantially if you captained Erling Haaland over Ekitike. But I have a slight preference for the Frenchman this week considering the fixture, and I think his ceiling is extremely high with back-to-back double-digit returns and a 9-pointer against Tottenham Hotspur last time out. I would start Robert Sanchez at home to Aston Villa, but Dubravka against Everton at home is a viable alternative, and for some people they might go for Rufs as their main choice of goalkeeper. That's absolutely fine, and I certainly wouldn't mind starting him against Leeds this week. And Mukiele definitely has a chance of breaking into the starting 11, but currently I've gone for O'Reilly, Van Dijk and Timber, which is as solid as you can get right now until Gabriel and Munoz are back from their injuries. Foden, Wilson, Rice and Semenyo is solid as well, with Ekitike, Haaland and Calvert-Lewin up front. Rodgers is first on the bench. You could certainly make a case for starting him over Harry Wilson, and Mukiele could also displace an O'Reilly or even a Calvert-Lewin in this starting 11, but Chow would remain on the bench against Man United away, and it does look solid in future weeks as well. You've got a combination of promising fixtures, DEFCON potential with the defenders, you've got attacking threat even from some of these players, particularly in the midfield and forward line of course, and real consistency and a high ceiling, bonus points potential, you name it. But in terms of alternatives, going back to Gameweek 18, this is what you could do. As one prime example, you could downgrade Rodgers to a cheaper midfielder and also Wilson to Xhaka, and that would immediately give you enough money to do Semenyo to Cunha, who would be the flavour of the week, in my opinion. The expected points is very high. Over the past 4 game weeks, he has returned very well. And you look at the upcoming fixtures like Newcastle and Wolves, and you would back Cunha to do really well, particularly in Gameweek 19. And Cunha could be my Bruno Fernandes replacement. It's between him and Rice. Long term, I think Rice is the better option, but Cunha looks really enticing as a short-term punt at the very least. But I've got a lot of short-term picks myself and plenty of yellow flags, which includes Hincapié, who might be unavailable for Gameweek 18, and of course Harry Wilson, which I discussed earlier. By going for a Xhaka or a different sort of midfielder, you could start him against Leeds at home, but I would be tempted to start Rodgers instead in this situation, and you could also do Rodgers to Anthony Gordon, which might not look great against Man United away this week, but it does in Gameweek 19 when Newcastle face Burnley, and long-term Newcastle have superb fixtures. I do think Bruno Guimaraes is more solid and secure though than Anthony Gordon, who had a terrible start to the season when it comes to goals and assists in the Premier League. When it comes to other goalkeepers, Rufs and Raya would be the standouts, and I still like Jordan Pickford, but he'd be ranked a little bit lower than the other two. If you want to cover Everton defensively though, I think Michael Keane is the best way of doing it until Branthwaite is back from his injury, and Tarkowski is decent, but I just think Keane offers significantly better value and he'll score more points whilst he's in that starting 11. With Man City, you've got Ruben Dias and also Gvardiol, but I think O'Reilly is a better choice when it comes to value. And some people might not be able to afford Van Dijk, so Konate could be that sort of sacrifice. I still think it's worth investing the extra millions in the Dutchman, but Konate is not a bad punt for the short to medium term. And with Arsenal, I was quite bullish on Hincapié for the past month, and he has been very solid in recent weeks, but that yellow flag has changed things a little bit, and Gabriel will be back very soon. And once that is the case, Gabriel is my top recommendation for that Gunners defence, and then Timber would be in second. And when it comes to the other defenders, I think Cash, Anderson all have solid shouts of being in the best wildcard squad, but I would rank Senesi and Keane even higher than those two at this moment in time. And when it comes to midfielders, you've got Bruno Guimaraes, of course, Antoine Semenyo, who you saw throughout most of this video, Morgan Rodgers, and there are plenty more that came from. That includes Bukayo Saka and Cole Palmer, but that requires a different structure in general. As you can see with the changes I made in this alternative section, I have nothing left over in the bank, but for some of you watching, you'll have even more money at your disposal. And if you do have, let's say, money to spare, Calvert-Lewin to Bowen would be my preference, but it's going to be very difficult to achieve, and it would require another downgrade here. And with Xhaka already as your budget midfielder, I'm not so sure if that's viable. Maybe that's where Virgil van Dijk downgraded to a very cheap defender would be the play, but I wouldn't want to have Mukiele and then Esteve, to name one example, which I talked about before. But these are my favorite players on the wildcard, and you can see the sort of structure. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below as always, and I definitely recommend using FPL Team because it is a great resource which I've highlighted throughout most of my wildcard videos this season, and it will really help you determine the best chip strategy, and everyone's situation will be different, but also comparing different transfer plans and then finalizing your favorite moves, and you can have a clear plan set in motion. You need to also be able to adapt, of course. That's a key quality for an FPL manager, and by improving your decision making, you will improve your chances of getting lucky, which you ultimately need in any fantasy football game. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both FPL and UCL fantasy. Let's get this video in particular to over 100 likes and closing on new goals like 38k on YouTube. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, further access to my videos, proud to add to comments, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the FPL League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Enjoy the festivities with your family and loved ones, and I'll see you on Boxing Day for the next deadline stream.